When it comes to marriage or just couples in general, talking about money can often be quite an uncomfortable topic.
Mm.
And it probably goes back all the way when you think about that first date, that first bill that comes through. Um, whose is it? And it can bring about a bit of an awkwardness on the date. But it's such an important topic that couples and successful couples have managed to tackle and address and speak about it. One of the things when you think of marriage is bringing two people together. As much as that's a beautiful union,
Mm.
but people come from different backgrounds and they have different approaches to spending or saving money. So maybe let's start there. How do you start to identify, or how do married couples start to identify the different approaches to money? And how do they make sure or try avoid that becoming an issue in terms of building wealth together?
Sure. No, it's an important question and it's the right question to ask. And I think the first thing is to try and have the discussion as soon as possible. And for some people, that can mean even as early as dating. So have the discussion as soon as possible because it's a hard discussion, and the earlier you have it, the easier it gets. I think the other point as well is that studies have shown in the States that the number one cause for stress in relationships is money. So that should also talk to the fact that it's a big component, right? The other thing I would say is maybe to start with going, what is my relationship with money? Because you said before I could come with certain ideas of how I think it's the right way to deal with money. An example, I could come from a family where money was really tight. So for me, savings might be important. Whereas to my partner, they might think, well, that's ridiculous. Why are we saving every penny and why can't we spend a little bit? So it's very important, as you've alluded to there, is who's the spender and who's the saver. Because once you understand how you approach money, it's much easier to have open relationships, open discussions rather, about money, because then you'll understand why you react a certain way.
Considering that marriage is about bringing two people together,
Mm.
what are some of the structures that work? Or, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is joint accounts,
Yeah.
right? Is that a good idea? When is it a good idea?
Yes.
What are your thoughts? And is there anything else that married couples can actually consider?
Definitely. I think it's such a personal thing. So I think the first thing, and it's going to sound so millennial of me, is you need to do what works for you. So I'll give an example. We've got a couple of friends and they do the joint account thing. So you earn X, I earn Y, and we put our joint savings into this account and our joint expenses come off that. And that works perfectly for them. And they tend to put into that expense account the ratio in which they earn. So if you're 40% and you're 60%, we pull our expenses together. And it works amazingly because what's left for me is left for me. So I can still enjoy my money.
Because the other thing that also comes up, conversation with friends, is around what if the one partner earns more than the other? How do you tackle that? How do you avoid creating a power imbalance in a relationship?
Yes. And it comes through without you even wanting to talk about it or not. What generally, and I'm making a generalization here, generally, if you've got 100 and the person who brings 20, they sometimes feel like they have a lesser voice because I'm not saving as much or I'm not contributing as much. So again, the conversation just helps. So the key point, I'm going to harp on it for a bit. The first conversation is understanding your relationship with money. I think then for the person who earns a little bit more, it is important for you to make sure that other person's voice is brought into it so that it feels like you're not being forced into a position, so that it feels like it's a team effort, because that's really what it is at the end of the day. The same way you would approach any other situation in your relationship like a team, you should be able to approach money like a team.
So basically, avoid the elephant in the room.
Avoid, talk
Have the
about it,
conversation,
and it's going to be
and
difficult,
yeah,
but talk about it.
and like with many things, the first time might be difficult, but the more you do it, the easier it actually becomes.
100%.
So the other thing when it comes to marriage, obviously, it's a call it a beautiful, simple symbol of a lifelong devotion.
Mm.
The other side of it, though, essentially, it's a legal contract. Doesn't sound as exciting, but it boils down to legal contract.
Yes.
How should couples, before they get married, or when should they be talking about the type of contract and what maybe some of the contracts that people can look at when it comes to marriage?
Sure. And like you say, it's romantic and it's beautiful, and you got great pictures, but it's a legal contract at the end of the day. I think for people who get traditionally married, you need to sort out advice because sometimes by getting traditionally married, you by chance get yourself into a certain type of marriage that you didn't have a say on. But the important part is to talk about, are we married in community, out of community, on the accrual, without the accrual? And again, that's a conversation. It can get tricky because it can sometimes feel like, are you trying to plan for the worst? Are we not going to be together forever? Are you trying to steal my money? But it is important to have those conversations upfront. So again, I can only talk to my example. Knowing, and when I met my husband, he always knew he wanted to be an entrepreneur. So we are married out of community or property on the accrual. And I always say the joke is, so if he makes lots of money, that I get the accrual, but out of community just helps in terms of the debt portion of things.
And I mean, bring up the point about dependence. I think that's also quite a critical part of the conversation.
So before you got married, your finances aren't that transparent with each other. But I could have dependents before we have kids or decide to have kids. I could have a grandmother's medical aid. I could have a sibling's school fees. I could have something I'm saving for a parent. And those conversations are important because your partner needs to know that you have dependents outside of the two of you, so that when you come together, are we still okay? Can we still manage those costs and looking after the people that we said we would? Those things are also important.
The other thing is obviously coming together, besides building your life together, is also building wealth together.
Mm.
What about things like insurance? Do they come into it in terms of either protecting or helping you build that wealth together?
It's the insurance layer is probably the first and most important layer, because I think what we think of is we think of our amazing house and the cars we're going to drive and where we're going to live and the holidays we're going on. The insurance layer is also a scary one to talk about, because once you've gotten past the part of, hey, this is my relationship and there's certain things I don't like about the way I act with money, and this is your relationship, we come together, these are the things we're responsible for. The next step then to go is, because no one likes to talk about this, the insurance layer is, what happens when I'm not around? What happens when you're not around? And those are not cool conversations to have, but they're important conversations, again, because of the dependence, not even kids, of other people that you've maybe supported. An example for us is when we got married, we said, okay, what is our debt together? So if we have a bond or our cars, whatever's outstanding. And initially we took out our insurance value for the value of our debt. So if one of us weren't around, that, because you're dealing with a lot of things at that point in time, right? If something goes terribly wrong that you didn't foresee, that you're able to be covered. And I think to get guidance from your advisor too is the nice thing about a life policy, say for example, is we know that it doesn't get locked up in the estate. So as soon as something goes wrong, you don't have to worry about finances because you've taken care of it and the policy pays you out. So again, they're such difficult conversations to have because we want the honeymoon stuff, right? But this stuff is important.
And I mean, that can range from all the way from call it simple income protection, should you lose your job,
Yes.
and all the way through to ill health or disability,
Disability cover,
including, I guess, ultimately death, unfortunately. Yeah.
100%.
All right.
That's right.
Look, it sounds like marriage is all about all these uncomfortable conversations,
It's
but
fun, I
ultimately,
promise.
that's what helps you build your dream, your dream life together.
Yes.
From your experience and your personal experience, what are some of the key things that you would like to share with anybody listening to this?
Anyone listening, is my husband listening? Can I ask him to make more money? No, I'm joking. I think the key component is have the conversation as soon as possible. Be honest with yourself, give yourself a little bit of grace because they're tough conversations. They're not easy conversations to have. And then I think remember that you're a team. That's why you got into this for the first place, right? So the way that you would tackle something as a team, sometimes teams need halftime breaks. They need to talk about things. They need to cool down. And then when they come back, they perform really well. So remember that you're a team and you can tackle anything, even money and marriage.